I remember sitting on the couch in my father's living room back in July of 2015. I was 9 years old, and I have no recollection of what I was actually doing at the time, but I do remember my father coming into the lounge informing me that the Japanese president of my favorite gaming company, Nintendo, had passed away. At the time, my knowledge of that president was limited. I had seen him in Nintendo Directs, fighting his fellow Nintendo CEO, Reggie Fils-Aimé, as part of the Mii Fighter reveal for Super Smash Bros. 4, and maybe I'd seen him once or twice in random videos. But even then, I felt the gaming world just took a massive blow, one that they would struggle to heal from in the years following. I recall telling my father that I wanted to write a letter to Nintendo, to send my condolences for losing such a strong figurehead and a key player in their developments. He chortled a little and told me that if I ever did write such a thing, he would send it off. I never actually did write that letter. As time went on, I learned more about this man. His conviction, his leadership, his open-minded attitude, and truly endless curiosity. I needed to learn more about him, and as early as my first days in college, I knew my intuition as a child about his death was not only accurate, but perhaps even an understatement, at least to me. Today, in a world of layoffs, corporate greed, live service business models riddled with microtransaction after microtransaction, company secrecy, industry stagnation, and powerful people letting their ego and dogma bring down entire populations, both in and out of the gaming world, it's easy to forget how a leader can be a force for innovation, exploration, and a leader for the people. And I can't blame you for forgetting. After all, how many visionaries go completely unnoticed before their time with us is over? It's been 10 years since we lost one of the most powerful leaders in not just gaming but in our history. Today, over a decade overdue, I hope I can make good on that letter my 9-year-old self wanted to write. A man who forged new paths, showed what it was like to lead from behind, to serve the people, who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty and help his staff. Most importantly, a man who impacted the lives of millions simply by being passionate. Thank you for everything, Satoru Iwata.
Trust your passion. Believe in your dream. For 25 years, game developers have made the impossible possible. So I ask you, why would we stop now?
I would like for this video to be a sort of case study of Iwata's leadership. This is not going to be a video detailing his life from start to finish like some sort of biography. There are plenty of those out there if you want to go watch them. But there will of course be some recounts. The stage needs to be set somehow. Primarily though, I want to explore his impact, his hows and whys that have led him to touch the lives of co-workers, rivals, and of me and maybe even you, many others just like us. Now, I firmly believe we should never idolize people, lest we run the risk of losing our identities, their identities, or the truth of their character. It should be stated that even with all the current backlash around Nintendo, around the Switch 2 game prices, their anti-consumer action, all that jazz, much of it likely would have happened regardless of if Iwata was there or not. He was not the only decision maker in the company, and I think those of us who do look fondly upon his reign probably need to remember that. Yet, if there ever was one person I respected above all others, it might just be him. One of the biggest inspirations of my life, up there with Bob Ross. And my parents, which no, I'm not just saying out of obligation, my parents are awesome, sod off. He was different. He was passionate, driven. A damn sight better than the leaders we have leading the world today. There's a certain warmth to each of his appearances. If you've watched any of his keynote speeches from the mid-2000s, you'll know what I mean. He had all these little anecdotes littered throughout them which just grounded him in a very tangible way. He wasn't larger than life, like many other presidents before him. Rather, he felt authentic, like he was one of us. His heart was seriously in his job, you know? How many people in today's economy can truly say that? I mean, sure, presidents probably love their job because it gets them rolling in the money, and I'm not saying all of them out there are out of touch with their industry, that would be a blatant lie. But no other CEO I have ever seen has had as much passion as Iwata did with his job. Other than, like, Reggie? Reggie's cool. It's something about Nintendo, I swear. Anyway, the point is, there's so much to talk about that I can only hope to explain what he means to me. I guarantee once this video is over, I'll have so much more to talk about, so I encourage you all to leave your own stories about him in the comments. We're all different ages, and come from different eras in gaming. I imagine all of us have different memories during his time, and even if you don't, I'll be interested to hear what you think of him after listening to this. But without further ado, let's explore his impact. No doubt, Iwata had an influence on many people. He was affable, quick-thinking, he had some quirks about him that made him enjoyable to work with. I find some of these office quirks quite amusing, honestly. According to this interview by Kadokawa, when asked to debug some code, he would think for a while, before a metaphorical light bulb basically sprung out of his head. Then he sat down and wrote out the code at breakneck speed. He would then get up, go do something else, probably wander over to the fridge and grab a handful of chocolates, then return right when the code was done compiling. It was as if computers spoke to him, and considering how involved he was in the field growing up, that certainly checks out. This confidence in his abilities didn't stop his teamwork skills though. He was still very collaborative. In fact, to my knowledge, many of the most famous Iwata stories involve him in a more supporting role. The aforementioned interview was provided by some pretty high-profile developers from close Nintendo collaborators. Of course, he still got his hands dirty, but that's what made him so special as a CEO. Having the guy who runs a company come up to you and assist, not scornfully, but just out of the love of the craft and respect for their employees. People just don't do that. But Iwata did. When the Famicom released in Japan, he and the small team at HAL Laboratories quickly got to work making games for it, partly owing to Iwata's almost instantaneous understanding of the device, due to its components being quite similar to a Commodore PET. An old computer far before my time, which Iwata spent a lot of time dabbling with. He developed a few games, such as Joust, a project his crew finished quickly but didn't get to release until several years later. Then there was Golf, Mark Rider, different smaller projects akin to what Intelligent Systems, the Paper Mario and Fire Emblem guys, would be doing a few years later. But once developer roles were more defined, he would largely step away from direct development in favour of attaining his first CEO job, now running HAL. Perhaps, though, he knew he could help more people from that position. Just in these first few years, I feel Iwata was already demonstrating what makes him such a fantastic leader. Again, a man in a high management position remaining thoroughly involved with the crew on the ground floor just feels so uncommon. And yes, I know HAL is, or at least was, a small company, and generally CEOs of small companies have more time and reason to actually stay involved. But he didn't just do this for his own company either. You see, the main reason he became CEO of HAL was because they were going bankrupt, and the then president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, insisted Iwata step up while Nintendo supported them financially. Yamauchi saw something in Iwata. A man who could function well in software, hardware, and management. It's as Reggie said in his speech on Iwata the year he passed. He was the perfect candidate to lead a video game company, and it's hard to argue against this. Through the 90s, HAL eventually stabilized with the efforts of Iwata and Nintendo, alongside the developers who worked under him, like Masahiro Sakurai and the Kirby team. We'll get to Sakurai more in a bit. I think it's important to cover him in the later section, but he's still a little bit relevant here. Furthermore, Iwata's knowledge on programming, particularly compression code, led him to work with many other people outside of just Nintendo and HAL, the most famous example being with Game Freak. It's widely cited that Iwata was the one responsible for porting the battle system from the original Pokemon Red and Green to the first Pokemon Stadium game, and for cramming the entirety of the Kanto region into Gold and Silver. Kanto? Kanto? I flip-flop all the time. Anyway, as cool as it would have been, that latter part is a bit of an exaggeration of what actually happened. It has since been better clarified that what he actually did was write compression tools to cram in all of the graphical assets the team would need. Pokemon Red and Blue already required the use of compression tools too. It's not unreasonable to assume Iwata had a hand in that as well, given he worked on the board of Creatures Inc. at the time too. Busy man that Iwata of ours. Golf on the Famicom as well, he personally describes as extremely impressive. having written the compression tools from the ground up to get all 18 holes onto that cartridge. Now, I believe that cartridge only contained up to 16 kilobytes of memory, and if you're my age, you might not fathom just how astronomically tiny that is. If you take a picture with your phone, that picture takes several hundred times more space than that cartridge had. It must have been a difficult journey, but his confidence in his abilities pulled him through. Only to land him into working on basically every single golf game for the Famicom, which, by the way, there is a ton of for some reason. Iwata himself mentioned he worked on at least 4, including Mario Open, and probably more if we're being real. These are some pretty impressive feats all on their own. That Iwata's compression wizardry was not only able to be blown up to a much grander feat, but that it was also believable, speaks volumes to the respect people have for his work. And hell, it's probably not even entirely incorrect. Without that code, it may very well have been much harder to fit as much as they did into Gen 2. These are far from his only credentials, of course. Shigesato Itoi owes him a great debt for how quickly he was able to turn around the development of Mother 2, our beloved Earthbound. The prototype for Super Smash Bros. Likely would not have been polished to the degree it was were it not for Iwata's quick handiwork. Even the localization of Enix's Dragon Quest was co-directed by Iwata, according to my sources. While Dragon Warrior, as it was called, didn't have nearly the same impact outside Japan as it did in its homeland, who knows where the godfather of JRPGs would be today without his hand during its initial overseas endeavours. What I find so admirable about all of this, however, isn't so much what he did, but rather what he didn't. What he instead let others do. He was quite hands-on in his early days, but the extent of his programming work on games once eventually rising to the president of Nintendo is, to my knowledge, unknown. He's mostly just listed as executive producer from 2002 onwards. Although, to say his contributions were simply greenlighting projects would be underselling it to the largest degree. Any Nintendo fan who grew up in the early to mid-2000s likely has Iwata to thank for some of the most innovative and legendary gaming experiences ever. It seems common today that Nintendo is often lambasted for lagging behind the competition in terms of hardware. And for sure these claims are not unfounded, although, for what it's worth, I think the gaming community at large is a tad too obsessed with graphics and processing power than they should be. Just in general, this mantra of progression and objective quality is a little bit of an eyesore, but I guess that's neither here nor there at the moment. There was a time though where, compared to their competition in Sony and Microsoft, Nintendo was actually leading the hardware market. As far as I'm aware at least. The Nintendo 64 and the GameCube were stronger than their rival consoles from a hardware perspective, and yet their market share was significantly smaller than their contemporaries. Power wasn't everything. And frankly, it shouldn't be. I don't personally remember a time like this across the globe, but I hear all the time that new hardware back in the day was not exactly a selling point. Now, me and my family are still very much like this. I have memories of playing Mario Kart Wii on a CRT well into the 2010s. We didn't buy any new gaming consoles the year of their release either, usually just waiting until there was a game my father just felt he had to play. We did get the Switch in April of 2017 though. My father just wanted to play Breath of the Wild. My memory of that event is kind of bland, to be honest, but I was 11 and mostly a Mario head. I think I started getting into Mega Man around that time too, but that's a side tangent. Even today, I didn't buy a Switch 2 until Fortune's Weave was announced, and I saw a deal on Facebook Marketplace for like $650, $150 less than the market price here in Aotearoa. This notion of new hardware playing second fiddle was especially prevalent in Japan, with the original Famicom and the FDS being actively supported until the early 2000s. The SNES didn't catch on immediately with Western consumers, despite being stronger than what came before. Sega's concurrent ad campaigns at the time were very aggressive, likely in part because they knew they couldn't sell off their processing power alone. New graphics, new power, that's cool and all, but what could you do with that if you didn't have any new games to show off? Iwata was promoted to president of Nintendo in 2002, and with him came innovation on a scale the industry had just never seen before, or arguably even since. The obvious examples here are the Nintendo DS and the Wii. Both were far from on par with their competitors in terms of hardware. The Wii especially released after the Xbox 360, which, without even going into the nitty-gritty, launched with HD support, and later models switched to HDMI cables to support even better HD. The Wii never switched to HDMI, remained squarely locked at 480i resolution tops, kept support for the 4:3 aspect ratio of CRTs, and yet it absolutely ran away with the market for years following its release. The DS on paper actually had competition in both its predecessor, the Game Boy Advance, and the vastly stronger PSP, yet is currently the second highest selling console of all time, although that throne is being challenged as we speak by the Switch. Why? We all know why. Accessibility and casual appeal. This was Iwata's famous Blue Ocean strategy. The DS and Wii set out deliberately to target a new audience, get them on board with the world of gaming with its own unique innovations. They were more than just game systems. Oh yeah, sure, Sony and Microsoft's consoles by this point were capable of running DVDs, soon they'd be running Blu-rays. But per Iwata's vision, the Wii was practically a home entertainment system. This isn't a Wii retrospective, but do you remember the Weather Forecast channel? The news channel? This thing even got Netflix later on. There was also Demaya channel, or home delivery channel in Japan. You could order food from the Wii. Uber Eats and DoorDash rip your hearts out. The DS originally was not Iwata's idea. It came from Yamauchi, the idea of a dual-screen system that capitalized on market trends, particularly online connectivity. This wasn't special to Nintendo obviously, but in tandem with their new software, unique IPs, and mass appeal, the gaming floodgates burst wide open in strikingly similar fashion to how the NES disguised itself as a toy when it first came out in the Americas. Games like Nintendogs, Brain Age, and of course the ever-beloved Wii Sports, baby! Hell yeah! These games, not just in their presentation, but the way you played them, caught the attention of the masses in unprecedented fashion. But while Iwata spearheaded the designs of these consoles, he was not the one in charge of their flagship software. Those were the brainchildren of his collaborators, giving these unspoken heroes a time to shine. He just gave them a voice, in more ways than one. Take some time to check out the credits of Wii Sports. It was a collaborative effort of 3 directors, all of whom had notable credentials. Takayuki Shimamura, Keizo Ota, and Yoshikazu Yamashita. These 3 directors for Wii Sports worked on other deeply important games across Nintendo's catalog too, though I'd argue this was their big headliner. You don't hear their names mentioned much these days, and that's okay, it's hard especially when other games you're more interested in have prolific developers. But they deserve just as much recognition for finding ways to use the Wii as Iwata and the team that created it. In all of this, you'd be forgiven for thinking the shift of Nintendo's focus under Iwata was at the risk of alienating their hardcore audience. But I highly doubt that was the case. Iwata knew that Nintendo's IPs were strong, recognizable, and unfortunately not all marketable to that casual audience they had their reticle on. And yet he made damn sure that the hardcore fans were not left behind. It doesn't take a genius to know that games like Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn or Metroid Prime Hunters were greenlit despite their console's appeal, not because of it. Decisions to localize risky titles like Xenoblade Chronicles and Pandora's Tower could not have been in line with some kind of mass appeal ethos, even if fan demand was notably quite vocal for those specific examples. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was a game they made in direct response to hardcore fan backlash towards the Wind Waker. Regardless of their newfound audience, Nintendo still made absolutely certain their devotees were not left behind. In his keynote speech in 2005, Iwata addressed the growing sameness and safety of games. As a gamer himself, he understood the desire to make products exclusively for target audiences, but he could see the untapped potential in the waters. Again, this blue ocean of his welcomed everybody. Your grandmother, who once thought Pokemon was the devil, could now play tennis with you and perhaps understand your hobby. People who felt video games were not for them, either too violent or bloody, too complex, too arcadey, could look after a pet dog, solve math equations, or simulate an alternate life in a relaxed and portable fashion, chipping away at tasks over long periods of time. Old school audiences who felt left behind by the advancements of 3D and the, still to this day, rather awkward focus on making games feel more cinematic, found homes with the side-scrolling action of New Super Mario Bros., the revival of Donkey Kong Country, and rediscovered their old favourites via the Virtual Console. Gamers who felt like such widespread appeal was too safe still had some legendary adventures to look forward to. And the best part, these audiences could cross over, dabble in each other's fields, find new love for this shared medium in ways they never felt possible before. That was the beauty of Iwata's strategy. Everyone could go for a swim, and anyone could find something that let them belong. As you probably know, should you be into games at least and aren't just watching this for the hell of it, hello by the way, hope you've been enjoying it so far. The era that followed the Wii was rough, to say the least. Naturally, the Wii's sales would decline. Heading into 2010, while it was still moving units, it was not nearly the juggernaut it had been previously. The 8th generation of gaming was nearing its arrival, and Nintendo just missed the mark. The 3DS had a rocky start, but it did gradually recover to what I would call a great success. The family by the end sold over 75 million units, which is about half as much as the original DS, but still great. The Wii U, however, rather famously crashed and burned. I would argue that mostly had to do with the utterly tragic marketing campaign, and frankly how unprepared it seemed the software lineup was for launch. It was mostly multi-platform releases or timed exclusives. Truthfully, I do think Iwata would be partially at fault here. While doubtless not the sole architect of either console, as the developer interviews he conducted for the 3DS and Wii U share, links directly in the description, honestly pretty fascinating insights. I do feel like he may have pushed his innovation ideas a little too hard, and the metaphor of a blue ocean begins to fall apart. It's one thing to capture an audience, but it's another thing entirely to try and alter what that audience is. And the DS and Wii's mass appeal did not necessarily convert the everyman into someone who would become brand obsessed with Nintendo. The 3D gimmick on the 3DS was simply too niche of an idea to catch mainstream appeal. It was marketable for sure, especially given the 3D craze at the time, but its staying power wasn't really present. Street Pass was pretty cool though, and honestly by the end of its run, I think the appreciation for what the 3DS could do was pretty strong. I mean, hell, look at the second-hand market. A good 2DS or 3DS goes for about the price of a new Switch OLED model. The 3DS aged like a fine, fine wine. Even if that's not necessarily Nintendo's doing. Modding. Sorry. The Wii U's gimmick, though, was just convoluted. The gamepad's display screen with added touch controls allowed for new possibilities with home console gaming, but compared to motion controls, the gimmick of displaying some things only on the gamepad just feels a little forced, you know? Doesn't help that I can't think of many games that even utilize this feature, let alone well. Super Mario Maker, Splatoon, and Tokyo Mirage Sessions are really the only ones that come to mind, and the latter two could just have easily done without their gamepad integration. Their Switch counterparts prove that. Mario Maker, on the other hand, honestly still feels better on the Wii U. The Wii U also masqueraded as a social media hub, communication device, and a TV remote, which I never really understood how to use growing up and still don't, to be honest. The system really just seemed like overambition, without enough strong software to actually back it up. Still, the downfall was mostly marketing, I think. They really could have actually shown the console, rather than just focus on the gamepad and not use the word console a single time in all of its reveals. With that said, these projects were nevertheless greenlit by Iwata. He saw their potential even if the public did not, and at a shareholders meeting, as concerns of layoffs rose industry-wide, Iwata slammed all worries his employees may have had, delivering a powerful message that still reverberates through my mind to this day. No layoffs would happen under his watch. Such unstable concerns for staff would only disrupt their work ethic, leading to poorer game quality. It would be unfair to just lay staff off, tell them to pack up. Morale would decrease, and where would they go? This is still a central concern today. We have seen the closure and discharge of many studios and staff across the industry over the past few years, and I think it really does show in the products put out recently, reinforced by the dismal practices used by these companies. Rather than see his staff off, in 2014, Iwata slashed his salary in half. A power move, in spite of the industry standards then and now, that was followed up by several executives taking a 20 to 30% cut to their own income as well. Apparently, he said this would be in effect for 5 months. Subjects have changed beyond that point, although I couldn't find another source corroborating this or following up. Regardless, such a statement sent a clear message. Iwata believed in his staff, and I think it showed. Nintendo is often criticized for lacking originality or feeling sterile in the 3DS and Wii U era. There is undeniably some truth to this. They were struggling, and needed to consolidate their brands into as recognizable a cohesive lineup as possible in order to turn any kind of profit. Mario Kart 7 and 3D Land in particular I think stand out as just being overly safe 3DS titles to get the ball rolling. 2 new Super Mario Bros. Games in the same year, regardless of how good or bad anyone thinks they are, is a little too, I guess, commodifying for what the Mario series can and has shown itself to be. Zelda rather strangely received 2 remakes and 2 remasters in this time period. Pokemon entered the 3D realm with X and Y, which relied heavily on nostalgia for the first generation. Metroid wasn't profitable at the time, Pikmin was in development hell, morale could not have been very high. This idea of Nintendo's laziness is certainly visible, especially in games like Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, a glorified tech demo. But I really do think the notion was overblown. This was not Iwata's doing alone, but as the captain of this unstable, sinking ship. He empowered his crew to keep making the best products they could, whenever they could. They had to push through and they knew it. Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey were deep into development, and during this time period, Zelda also received 3 entirely new titles. Fire Emblem was given a second wind that revitalized the series. And say what you will about Pokemon's later generations, but Black and White 2 and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire released on either side of X and Y, and still showed the series' intense passion behind it. Iwata's belief in his dream may have been partially responsible for getting Nintendo into this mess. But he would not hide behind his employees. He would stand alongside them, in front of them even, promoting their work and redefining what it meant to be a corporate president in the eyes of many a consumer and fan at the time. How, you may ask? Well, if you were following Nintendo at this time, I think you know what comes next. As far as CEOs of companies go, I have never seen or heard another have quite as strong a presence as Satoru Iwata. And it's weird, honestly. When I look back at all the companies I've ever had an interest in, I guess, I couldn't tell you the first thing about their upper management, and that's honestly okay. I don't think we need to know anything about any given CEO. The current president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa, is much less visible than Iwata was. Most company presidents aren't, rather leaving their developers as the ones to discuss their games. They're the ones on the show floor, of course, getting their hands dirty with the development themselves and engaging with the fans. They're the characters directly behind the experience we have. To be honest, this is okay. More than okay, it's probably healthier that we don't know as much about them. CEOs often aren't as involved in the industry as you think. Doug Bowser and the new Nintendo of America president, Devin Pritchard, probably aren't as invested in games from a consumer and fan point of view, and that's fine. Sony and Microsoft have much bigger fish to fry. They aren't just video game companies. And you know the owners of big phone brands are far from being deeply invested in the industry. Remember, however, that Iwata started out as a game designer, before even Hell Labs, back when it was just him, his friends, and his motorcycle. He would rather famously develop games on his HP calculator, lacking any graphical capability whatsoever, just to see the joy in his friends and classmates bubble over. He understood that games connect people, that they are an outlet for expression and creativity, and he took that experience with him to the managerial role. Behind each game there are people, who each bring their own vision to the product. Even once he took to the position of president and became mostly an executive producer, he never lost that desire to see that creative process in action. Not only that, but he wanted the rest of us to see it too. Let's start off with Iwata asks, I briefly mentioned it before, and you've probably heard of them, but for the uninitiated, these were a series of interviews Iwata conducted with the development staff on numerous projects across Nintendo. They gave us insights into the development and thought process behind several games, and displayed a tangible human side to the industry. We're all acutely aware, of course, that the games we play are made by people. At least I hope so. I really hope that statement doesn't age poorly. Oh no. But actually getting to see that, to see the discussion taking place, the jokes exchanged, just people being people talking about the things they love. It's awesome in a way I can't really describe. If reading interviews aren't your thing, there are several Iwata Asks videos as well. From the interviews I've read and watched on the same game, they don't seem to be direct transcriptions of one another, but I haven't read or watched every Iwata Asks ever made, so your mileage may vary, I'm not sure. Through these sessions, Iwata opened the door for us to learn more about these developers and our favourite games. I might be biased due to my love for the series, but the Xenoblade Chronicles interview is one of my favourites. Iwata facilitating some genuine heart-to-hearts between the staff. For example, Takahashi and Mitsuda's long-standing work relationship is on full display, and the team uncovering the revelation of how Takahashi handled writing his emails was pretty golden. Each individual present for the discussion viewed and interpreted the world of the Bionis and Mechonis differently, which is something I imagine each of us who have played the game also feel. It's almost like exchanging opinions and discoveries about a particular game with other enthusiasts, except it's the development team themselves. This is just one example, but if your favourite game from the DS, Wii, 3DS or Wii U has an Iwata Asks or two, checking it out might be well worth your time. The fact that these exist at all, I think, shows Iwata's care for both his staff and the fans of Nintendo. It also shows his background as both a gamer and creator, linking these two worlds as best he can, and to this day I've seen nothing else like it. Iwata had a strong presence at expos and conferences as well, in particular at the Game Developers Conference, or GDC, where he would deliver some of the most passionate speeches about both Nintendo and the industry as a whole. They were full of character and often super down to earth. GDC, to my knowledge, is a largely professionals-only conference, where the industry gathers to discuss innovation, market shifts, and other such corporate jibber-jabber. With how relatable Iwata's speeches were though, you'd think he was speaking to a much different audience. He had such a way with words. It was still largely business-related, but he would sprinkle in anecdotes about himself and his history with games, and he'd speak from the perspective of the avid consumer much of the time. It made these business talks understandable, especially for someone like me. So I frequently get bored out of my mind listening to business jargon or statistics. Most of the time, even mundane conversations don't hold my interest. I need something with genuine passion behind it for my own attention to be locked in. That is exactly what Iwata provided. That little side comment about his motorcycle I made earlier? Well, that information came directly from the man himself at the 2005 GDC keynote he gave. Out of all of his speeches, this is probably the one you're most familiar with. He discusses market trends and design philosophy in ways that feel intuitive, and he does so with so much passion that I almost want to go out of my way to study the business side of the industry. That's how powerful a relatable figure like that is. I think this is intentional on his part too, bringing together gamers and game developers as best he can, presenting himself authentically, accent be damned, to his peers and company audience. This is best exemplified, of course, by how he opened this keynote. One of the most legendary lines ever uttered. One that cuts even deeper than I remember, listening to it again all these years later.
On my business card, I am a corporate president. In my mind, I am a game developer. But in my heart, I am a gamer.
I find these keynotes invaluable to me in understanding gaming as a hobby at large. As of writing this, I only recently learned about his 2011 keynote, probably his most business-oriented speech, but it continues the trend of being super easy to follow. There's just so much to learn from a man who's been involved in all aspects of gaming since its formative years, and it's truly a blessing that he was willing to share it all. But alas, no discussion of Satoru Iwata's public image is complete without Nintendo Directs. They were his brainchild, and what I imagine to be his most closely associated contribution to the company, and indeed to the industry as a whole. Now, I wasn't even 6 years old when the first Direct aired, but to my knowledge this was yet another of his legendary Blue Ocean strategies. E3 existed, yes, and several gaming journal publications and magazines conducted interviews for upcoming projects. But the former was insiders only until 2017, and there's only so much time and space the latter has to conduct their business. Now, with Nintendo Directs, we got announcements directly from the source. Not only that, but they were delivered with what is, at this point in this essay, an absurdly evident running theme: character and passion. It wasn't just Iwata. This is also the era where the originator himself, Mr. Fizeme, would come to prominence, his own charm often even exceeding his fellow president. President of Nintendo Europe, Satoru Iwata, along with Bill Trinan, another quite beloved figure, and many others were featured throughout these presentations. Frequently little skits were created too, humor injected into them and parts to promote the family-friendly image Nintendo are so inseparable from, but also just to show these industry professionals as human, and not just human, but relatable too. Remember that this was the Wii U and the 3DS era. Nintendo was struggling at this time, and yet they never relented. Okay, quick anecdote time. I can still remember the first Nintendo Direct I ever watched. It was the April 2015 Direct. A lot of cool stuff was shown off for my little impressionable mind. There was Mewtwo and Lucas announced for Smash 4, a bunch of cool little indie games, most of which I would forget about and never really play, but they were cool at the time. Some little niche game called Tokyo Mirage Sessions was shown off, which would, in a very roundabout way, kickstart my love for both Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei. Fire Emblem Fates, ironically my least favorite games in the series, so far, were also shown off here, and I was just captivated. My father downloaded this video off of the internet and stuck it in our videos folder on our computer so that whenever I woke up early in the morning, I could go downstairs, grab a bowl of Weet-Bix and rewatch this one singular Direct again and again. God, how many times did I do that? I must have done so at least every couple of weeks. I could have been watching Ninjago, the Clone Wars, Johnny and the Sprites, but no, it was this. And part of it was the guy who opened it, Satoru Iwata. Something about the way he spoke just enthralled me. The accent was odd, sure, but his passion was evident, and he was genuinely just excited to share what his teams have been working on. He is effectively sharing a new discovery he finds interesting with others who share a similar passion, infecting us all with that same giddy excitement. This joy Iwata constantly expressed made me excited for games I truthfully don't care for in the end. His team carried that same energy. It's awesome just to see how, despite the trying times, everyone was still motivated and on board with their work. There was, on the whole, a pretty heavy effort to connect with the community. Random videos as well as directs often involved plenty of skits, or perhaps unintentionally funny moments featuring Iwata and especially the Nintendo of America staff. I'm sure many people remember the amount of Reggie and Bill memes from this era. That kind of character was just all over Nintendo at the time. Iwata had quite a few highlights at this time, including staring at bananas for several seconds, completely straight-faced, before resuming like nothing happened. There was the Muppet homage during E3 of 2015 with Miyamoto and Fizeme, which I don't remember live, weirdly, despite being pretty sure that was the first year I ever watched E3. I mentioned it right at the start of this video, but probably my most memorable Iwata moment, other than the April 2015 Direct, was his fight with Reggie to reveal the Mii fighters in Smash 4. I hadn't even started martial arts yet, definitely did not have the knowledge to quote-unquote appreciate the choreography on a technical level, but I was like 8 years old, and I don't think adults, trained or not, could ever think this fight as cringe or hard to watch. It's the sheer passion, the respect these two have for each other, the over-the-top nature of it all that drew us all in and endeared us to them. Or at least their presented character. I mean, come on! It's two company presidents throwing hands at each other for our entertainment. How is that not humanizing? It's the word of the video, really. Passion. It's what Satoru Iwata was known for. It's what Reggie, Sakurai, Miyamoto, Shibata, probably everyone who got to know the guy would tell you about him. In his heart, he truly was a gamer. But more than that, he was a gamer who showed me, us maybe, that it was okay to love this hobby, to share it with others, to break it down, tear it apart, soak it in, and really embrace our individuality. For that, and for so much more, I owe his memory this love letter. The final days of Satoru Iwata's life seem to have been quite the busy ones. The man couldn't keep away from his job. Having undergone surgery for a tumour in his bile duct around E3 of 2014, he took a temporary absence from work before returning in October of that year, having allegedly lost a significant amount of weight. While he felt healthier, the truth of the matter seems to have been that the problem was greater than what the surgery could solve. And of course, in July 2015, the catalyst for this very video occurred with his death. The stories around Iwata's funeral are quite picturesque, which might be a weird thing to say about a funeral, but it's a testament to how well respected the man was. In an utter downpour, upwards of 4,000 people came to attend and pay their respects. Family, friends, co-workers, rival developers, and even just those who admired him stood out in that weather. And you know what? If anyone deserved that level of respect, it's him. I don't think I know of any other leader in history, certainly none in power right now, who I would ever do that for. It's easy to say in hindsight, sure, but I know had it been in my ability, I would have done the same. That day marked the end of Iwata's physical life, but right up until the end, he was ambitious, and there were still a couple more projects in the pipeline with his name on it. As Genyo Takeda said in one beautifully written eulogy, the seeds he had planted, and plants that have sprouted, will put forth small flowers, as they bring smiles to the faces of the people around the world, blossoming into a grand flower bigger than even you. And well, blossom these projects would. If, for whatever reason, your faith in Nintendo was shaken by the Wii U, what followed post-mortem of Iwata surely would have mended it, as a landslide victory was just around the corner. While he was in hospital, Iwata was exchanging notes with Tsunekazu Ishihara of the Pokemon Company, securing a deal with Niantic, and developing a little title called, let's see here, Pokemon Go, which I shouldn't have to tell you took the world utterly by storm. Not just once upon its release in 2016, but somehow twice in the middle of the big corona back in 2020. This project single-handedly put Nintendo back on the map, but also in the palm of anyone's hand at any time. Frankly, it was genius. It was around its original release in 2016, where children getting phones slowly became normalized. To this day, I'm not entirely sure why that happened, but I imagine this was probably a part of it. About half a decade before this, Iwata had stated Nintendo wanted nothing to do with the mobile gaming market. He was vehemently against free-to-play games riddled with microtransactions, and the idea of normalizing this as a monetization scheme felt more like a cheap turnaround than the passion he was known for. To an extent, I can agree with this. However, times were changing. Mobile gaming, especially today, has all but eradicated dedicated handhelds from the public eye, and given the almost dire straits Ninty found themselves in, there was probably a lot of pressure put on the higher-ups to seriously consider alternate business strategies. I never really got into Pokemon Go, but today Nintendo has multiple live service games, some of which have been around long enough to reach end of service. And yes, microtransactions are involved. I hesitate to say this would not have happened under Iwata's leadership. I would love to imagine a world where the gacha-ification of modern gaming wasn't so strong. But the market has proven itself, and Nintendo's IPs are so iconic that ignoring such an opportunity is basically equivalent to leaving diamonds on the side of the road. You'd be a fool not to take such a prime opportunity. Believe me, I hate gacha mechanics through and through, and being a free-to-play player myself doesn't mean the business model isn't predatory, especially to children, a massive part of their audience. But for what it's worth, Fire Emblem Heroes and Pokemon TCG Mobile, the only two gachas, and mobile games for that matter, that I play, are Nintendo owned and are the most free-to-play friendly games in this genre I've seen. I hear Dragalia Lost was much the same, and despite still having microtransactions, it's all guaranteed rewards in Fire Emblem Shadows. Though that does not incline me to return to that one anytime soon. I got so bored with that title. I do believe it was inevitable, but Iwata's commitment to quality and Nintendo's honest effort to make their mobile games, well, not consumer-friendly, but more ambivalent than malevolent for sure, reflect that initial vision, at least in scraps. And hey, if you enjoy any of these games, more power to you. The other massive project was the Nintendo Switch 2, technically. The road to the Switch's development, I'd argue, can be traced to 2013, when the console and handheld development teams within Nintendo were merged. This allowed for more cross-platform compatibility, and saw interactions between the Wii U and 3DS, not to mention versions of games on both systems. But, of course, the Wii U is in a whole nother league of power compared to the 3DS, so compromises had to be made if cross-platform games were to be recognized as the same game. For Super Smash Bros. 4, transforming characters in Smash Brawl had to be split, and the Ice Climbers tragically couldn't make the transition. At least they weren't alone in getting cut. But the game itself ran pretty well on both systems. Combining the teams paid off, and this wonky experiment paved the way for the vision of the Nintendo Switch. This wasn't specifically Iwata's brainchild, as the Wii was. Rather, like how he helped Yamauchi with his DS concept, Iwata received help from Tatsumi Kimishima, Genyo Takeda, and Shigeru Miyamoto in a revitalization meeting. Talks with Nvidia to develop custom hardware that could produce the home console experience on the go got off the ground, and throughout most of the 8th generation of gaming, the concept of the Switch was workshopped and refined. Iwata wouldn't get to see the fruits of his labor, but to quote Jesse Huang, his clarity, his purpose, inspired their work well after his death. The Switch realized that vision, and to this day, I still regard it as one of the most innovative pieces of technology, bringing people together with its easy portability, multifunctional controllers that, I don't care what you say, fulfilled their jobs very well, and the utterly stellar lineup of Nintendo and third-party IPs that made for a great personal and party experience. You could of course play on the TV. The Switch's dock made for a surprisingly portable device too, so you could take it with you to hotels or venues or wherever. You could play on the couch, in the car, at work, in bed, by yourself, with friends, in a multitude of games from the casual to the competitive, to the immersive and universally fun. The Nintendo Switch screams Satoru Iwata from every angle. Everyone who worked alongside him made sure it lived up to its vision. The Switch 2 further refined this idea with improvements to its technology, allowing for experiences I honestly find borderline unfathomable. I'm sure the hardcore PC crowd, or those invested enough to buy the Pro models of the PlayStation and Xbox consoles, may roll their eyes at this a little bit, but I've never really been about graphics in games. Yet the Switch 2 edition of Tears of the Kingdom almost literally blew me away with how smooth and pretty it felt, and I was enjoying my time with that thing on the original Switch. I do think with things like the Twitch, Rogue Ally, and Steam Deck, we are pushing what is really portable, in the sense that the days where my console fit in my pocket are long gone. But that market has largely been usurped by phones, to be fair. And even though Nintendo's business model around the Twitch is, well, atrocious, putting it charitably, I still think at its core what the system is a worthy successor to Iwata's vision. Where would Nintendo be without Satoru Iwata? Where would HAL Labs, Sakurai, Itoi, the video games industry as a whole be without him? Where would I be without him? He did not build and rule an empire by himself. He was respected by his peers, entrusted with power, and used that power to create a rising tide in his blue ocean, lifting all ships, not just his own fleet. There were those among his colleagues who had ideas of their own they wanted to see fulfilled, and Iwata made sure that they could fulfill them. Projects that would have been cancelled or drastically altered if not for his help or facilitation. Trailblazers who were able to show the world what for thanks to Iwata's belief in them. His impact is still rippling throughout the entire industry, and I doubt that will ever change soon. In a way, it's like he never died, still breathing life into every corner of gaming. Okay, I've sprinkled little bits of personal anecdotes and observations throughout this discussion, but here I just want to clearly state how much this one man has impacted my life in various ways, alongside notable examples from his close friends. Before that, though, I also need to re-establish what I said at the start of this discussion. I love and respect the hell out of Iwata. As admittedly a fairly substantial generalization, I'm not very fond of people. And so in some ways I find it frustrating that there are exceptions to the rule of people suck. It happens often enough to disturb me, but not often enough to bring that rule into question. I absolutely understand if this video has made it sound like I view Iwata as some kind of untouchable saint who could do no wrong, or whom I desire to perfectly replicate, or some other parasocial blindness. Yes, he's a man I look up to, a man whose legacy has left a profound impression on me and whose ideas and passion inspire me to be the best I can. I do wish I could have met him, but I think to put him up as some kind of perfect ideal goes against the very essence of his philosophy, as it does mine own. None of us are above any other. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and to try literally be somebody else as closely as possible causes our own identity to shift. As I said, I think that much of what Nintendo has become today would likely have happened regardless of if he was still here or not. I can't prove that, of course, it's just a feeling. But idol culture or adjacent social phenomena aren't things I consider very healthy, not for the idolizers, nor the people or memories being idolized. It creates figurative blindness, normalizing hate culture against those who might disagree, or creating echo chambers with others, or even yourself, about some perceived, unchallengeable perfection. It creates extremes that take a toll on the mental health of everybody involved. Iwata is dead, yes, but to me, that means we must be even more careful of how we perceive him, lest we corrupt his legacy. Anyways, with that little rant out of the way, the fact remains that I do still love what he did, and I'm not the only one. Many of his colleagues and friends have spoken about their fond memories of him. For example, Shigeru Miyamoto and Iwata were confidants. Starting while the latter still worked for HAL, they would share lunches together, going Dutch since their companies didn't pay for such expenses. Little memories like that, I think, tend to stick with you. These meetings seem to have been a great comfort spot for Miyamoto, a man with some pretty notoriously cryptic ideas that would require multiple people to get the message across in development conversations. Iwata just seemed to get him and his zaniness in a way that no one else could. To quote Miyamoto after Iwata's passing, "The only problem is that if there is some good-for-nothing idea I come up with over the weekend, I have no one to share it with next Monday." This quote honestly wakes something in me a little. I often have quite abstract thoughts that are sometimes difficult to communicate, and when I can, they're often not exactly... I suppose palatable is the word. Dude, perfect example right there. I'm a story nerd. I study philosophy, I can be quite existential or get lost in the detail of things. But those incredibly few people, who both are willing to hear me out and have the patience for my insanity, are some of the most important people to me. Not just as a function, but as friends whom I would just as soon return the favor to. Iwata confided too, believing in one way or another that he would recover from the issues that took him before he could. But even if he knew that wouldn't be the case, Miyamoto was just that kind of a friend. The kind that motivated and inspired him in turn. Even once Iwata technically became his boss, the two continued this tradition of eating out. Again, he really wasn't above anyone else. Maybe on his business card, but not in his mind or heart. Shigesato Itoi as well owes a great deal to Iwata. The two met during the hellish development of Mother 2, and Iwata gave him an ultimatum: to continue where they were in the code and take 2 years, or just let him rebuild everything and it'd be done in 6 months. Itoi was like, who is this guy? But the development team seemed already aware of his talents, and Itoi felt his passion bleed into his work. Over time, he saw Iwata as his best friend. The two would just shoot the stuff, have fun conversations. They became more than just workmates. And Iwata came to the rescue yet again throughout Mother 3, back when it was internationally called Earthbound 64. He wasn't as hands-on, but he helped in ways he could. And even though he was torn away due to other commitments as development on Mother 3 kept dragging on and on, I have a feeling he was still involved in getting the game to that finish line. More than what that executive producer role implies, at least. Although I could be wrong. Maybe he had nothing to do with the game once it switched to the GBA, I don't know. Regardless, 4 years following Iwata's death, Itoi published a book in his memory. A love letter to his old companion and a collection of his words. Of wisdom and of significance. And then, there's Masahiro Sakurai. I don't doubt the others had deep, profound relations with their former CEO, but the admiration Sakurai had for his mentor really does seem unmatched. From their days working in HAL together, the two shared an undeniable bond. Much of the information of their bond comes from a video Sakurai released towards the end of his YouTube channel. If you haven't watched it, please go do so, as I think hearing it from the man himself will do a better job than any of my paraphrasing will, so I've left a link in the description. He provides confirmation on pretty much everything we've discussed in this video from a first-hand perspective. Iwata was deeply involved in aspects of his company. He was personal and authentic, writing emails himself and visiting any businesses personally that he needed to. He had one-on-one meetings with his employees, and even as his responsibilities mounted, he still made time for his friends. In the late 90s, the two had a private passion project called Kakuto Game Ryuo, also known as Dragon King the Fighting Game. The only time Iwata ever personally programmed with Sakurai, and a concept that would eventually blossom into Smash Bros. When Smash Melee's rush development was nearing its end, and Sakurai was struggling to keep up with his team due to health reasons, it was Iwata who stepped in, and did the best he could, polishing the game and debugging any issues. Now, notoriously, Melee is still a glorious mess of funny exploits, balancing and jank, but perhaps without him, I wouldn't be able to use the word glorious to describe one of the most electric fighting games of all time. I think because of this mutual trust and shared background, Iwata felt comfortable entrusting Sakurai with any project, even when sprung on him, like Brawl was, or greenlighting Sakurai's request to develop Kid Icarus Uprising. Sakurai's final memory of his mentor was driving him to an airport before a trip to the United States. Iwata's health was already deeply in decline, but he remained positive. Whether Iwata knew it would be the last time they'd see each other or not, we are left to speculate. But I think being so upbeat and willing to make light of a pretty rough patch of his life shows the connection they had. These are far from the only examples. Reggie, ever the legendary icon, delivered a heartfelt speech in Iwata's memory at the 2015 Game Awards, again painting a picture of how well the two knew each other. Through a typically quite strong language barrier, Iwata made an active effort to communicate with Reggie, and he returned the favor in kind. I'm sure their mutual language exchanges were entertaining for each other, speaking from experience. Representatives from across the industry came together in commemoration. Several publications made tribute pieces. Nintendo named an entire mountain after him, and eternally reincarnated Iwata in Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, one of the most serene places you can find in that game. And then there are the fans. So much love poured out from those whose hearts Iwata touched, even if they never truly knew each other. If you've made it this far, I know you know who he is by now, but if you want to see the sheer level of respect people had, you really don't have to look far. As I said, I don't think I would be where I am today if not for his influence. And to be honest, this script has been in the works for so long, and its length has just gotten away from me, so I don't want to keep rambling on. But it's true. Seeing his name mentioned as special thanks at the end of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, I literally physically couldn't help but salute. In a movie theater, with like 5 of my friends who had no idea who he even was. That's how powerful his impact feels. Without him, many of my formative memories, most beloved games, and driving motivations might not have reached me. Fire Emblem's first foray into the international market, back in 2003, came under his leadership as CEO of Nintendo. Intelligent Systems probably got the go-ahead, maybe even the request to localize the game from Iwata himself, following the runaway success that was Martin Roy's appearance in, what else? Melee. Either way, he was involved in the eventuality of the series coming out of Japan. That series still remains my favorite media series ever to this day, and I'd be lying if I said the stories I write had no influence from it. Xenoblade Chronicles, or Xenoblade depending on who you want to be, is again one of my favorite series of all time. And while it was a more subtle role, the rebranding of Monado, the Beginning of the World, to Xenoblade, in honor of director Tetsuya Takahashi's previous work, was his idea. The Smash series itself has become so integral to my in-person social life, thankfully not online enough to bother with the hellscape that is Smash social media, with a fantastic competitive community in the city I live in while attending university, not to mention the wider national and international scenes. We all got brought together under a creation he helped herald in, developed under Nintendo's noses in service to his friend. The Wii was my first console, and it holds far too many memories for me. It provided accessibility in a way my dumb infant brain could actually intuit. I don't remember what my first game was, and I was at most 2 years old when we got the thing. But recorded in an old daycare portfolio of mine is a page recording a weekend, I think from 2009, where I moved into a new bedroom and unlocked the Star Cup in Mario Kart Wii. Now that's not how it's described. It doesn't say Star Cup anywhere, instead it says, ahem. There are leaf piles to drive through in the Caterpillar one, and they zoom through a tree. And there's lava falls and fire and lava bomb fall out of the little green things on the top. Dude, I'm pretty sure that's gotta be transcribed directly from words I spoke. It's a little goofy to look back on, but that's how integral the Wii was to my life, that I would speak about these experiences to other people at daycare. My father quite vividly recalls, quote, the day his life changed, recounting in a speech he gave at some conference when 5-year-old me beat him in Mario Kart for the first time. My father is in large part another reason why I've become such a nerd, frankly, but that's far from a bad thing. He encouraged me to get better at these games, and Iwata's guiding hand through the intuitive accessibility of the Wii brought me there. Super Mario Galaxy taught me how to platform. Mario Kart Wii taught me patience, and as a former Wii wheel driver, a very, very, very rough idea of how a car actually works. He didn't make these games, no, but he facilitated my experience of them. Wii Sports Resort might very well be the origin point for my love of weapons and enjoyment of outdoor movement. I don't know that for sure, but if we're tracing things, that could be it. Much later, I would discover Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn as my favorite game, until Xenoblade 3 came along years later. And I'm delighted to finally own a physical copy of Radiant Dawn, considering how elusive that game can be. I still own a Wii. It's not my original one, though it's still a Wii from my childhood, as my grandparents, yes, literally it's not just a folktale, bought one to engage with us as children, and I think they actively used weather channels on it as well. The Wii U, Switch, and the 3DS family all also had great effects on me too. But, this video's seriously getting long now, and my anecdotes for those I don't find quite as relevant. If not for the Wii, would I even be here? Would my relationships with my family, friends, online associates even be the same? Who knows? But we're here, and I'm glad it happened. Honestly, I don't know if this is the kind of letter I wanted to write back then. It's been 10.5 years, and like anyone in 10 years, but especially as someone who's gone from a literal child to, allegedly, an adult, things have changed. Hell, I don't even know if this is the letter I want to write right now. But it's the letter I have written. It's what I could write. It's what felt right in the moment. Our formative experiences, the things that leave the deepest impressions on us. I don't think we really get to control that, but the motivations that arise from those experiences, choosing to take or reject those hands that guided us to where we are, what we do with those experiences, those I think are within our control. And there's no denying that Iwata had a positive influence on an incomprehensible number of lives that chose not only to acknowledge, but remember him, even a decade after his passing. Through his creations, his work ethic, his presence, personality, authenticity, and direct, intuitive communication, not to mention passion for his hobbies, job, and people, he touched the souls of many across the globe. Combine that with his knowledge of his craft, curious mind, and smart business instincts. And I agree with Reggie. I could not manufacture a better image of a person to lead, be it a games company or really anything. Thank you so much for everything, Mr. Iwata. A shining beacon, in an era of the gaming industry that feels more corporate than ever. Your impact on many of us is still so strong, and I only hope that we can return the favor in some way. Hey, kia ora, and thanks so much for making it to the end. Maybe you learned something today from watching this, or you took the time to remember a legend like Iwata or someone else in your life. Maybe your parents, maybe someone who helped you get to where you are. There's so many different ways to lead, and I just find Iwata's way in particular just to be quite fascinating to me. So that's what I went with. And if you guys have memories of him, if you grew up in the same era I did with the DS, the Wii, and the Wii U, and the 3DS, maybe you grew up a little bit later or before, maybe you got to know the guy even, I don't know. I would encourage sharing anything you can remember of Iwata in the comments, and I'd make damn sure that's a safe thing to do. I don't want this comment section being like the hellscape or anything. I would like to facilitate an open, philosophical and analytical and introspective, retrospective discussion space for people to just share things in. Hi, anyway, I'm Cypherus, in case you didn't know. This video has been in the works for a long time. Life got quite busy. This is actually supposed to come out many months ago, last year even, but things just got busy. I'm not one to make excuses though, I'll get better. And there's a lot I learned in this process. I think I understand how I want to make things going forward a little bit more. Though there's also things I need to clean up, like my audio probably needs work, frankly. My editing will need work, maybe my scoring as well. I enjoy doing that. I was originally going to put my own piano rendition of Pollyanna at the start, but I didn't get around to cleaning it up as much as I would like. So, I didn't end up doing that. But that's a thing I could do. But yeah, this is the first video on this channel, and there's so much more I want to do with it. I want to talk about just things I love in a kind of philosophical, analytical way. I do a philosophy degree. It's one of the things I love, and one of the reasons why this took so long, because I was working on other things too. And I want to facilitate that space for people, just to have that discussion. That's something I want to do here. There's many more projects on the horizon. I can't guarantee when they'll come out, because I'm entering the last semester, which will be fun, and I have a lot of other things in my life other than university that I do. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know when the next project will come out, but hey, happy for you to have been here, and if you want to stick around, I hope to keep showing you stuff in the future. But until that rolls around, not Mickey Moo. Take care out there, and yeah, I'll see you when I see you.